Earlier this week at a White House event that was about reinstating presidential physical fitness standards, Donald Trump asked an 8-year old boy that was there, being used as a political prop, whether he thought he could beat Donald Trump in a fight. Let me reiterate that because this is real life. This is a thing that happened. Can't unhappen. It's up on the YouTube. But basically, Donald Trump, the President of the United States, a 78-year-old man, asked an 8-year-old boy whether that boy thought that he could beat Donald Trump in a physical fight. Um, it's almost too stupid to even think about, but here we are. YouGov decided that obviously this is something that we need to get the American people's opinion on. So they ran a poll. They asked 2,609 Americans, which is a big, that's a good, you can get a representative sample as long as people are responding, reasonably high rates. But they asked them three questions. Could an average American beat Trump in a fight? Could an 8-year-old boy beat Trump in a fight? And could you personally, the person responding, beat Trump in a fight? And the results are, I don't know, they're kind of hilarious in a lot of ways. They don't make a whole lot of sense based on what it takes to win a fight, like what typically happens when you have two similarly trained combatants, which is to say, in this case, untrained combatants, really, with similar levels of physical fitness, which is to say, um, basically no physical fitness when you're talking about either Trump or an American. But I want to take this question seriously because this is where the national conversation is. So I'm trying to be part of that, I guess. Um, but before I get into the Trump poll specifically, I want to use another YouGov survey that this is from like I don't know, a year or two ago. It was going around not too long ago. I think it was Biden era. But it was about how people answer a similar question. It was about what animals people could fight. And I think the main animals that I thought were really revealing were how many people thought they could defeat a goose, which I think basically. Sorry, I lost the number here. But a surprising number of people said that they couldn't beat a goose or a medium dog in a fight. And I, I understand that on one level. Like, if someone's trying to imagine themselves killing any kind of animal, that's a tough ask. And like, it's hard to imagine the scenario in which a goose is really a physical threat to a person. A goose, I think a big goose is like 20 pounds. And a medium-sized dog, now, I mean, they got teeth, they're pretty fast, but they're about 50 pounds. And they're very easy, both of those animals are very easy kick level. Medium-sized dogs, much more of a threat, but, you know, it's just wild because, like, literally losing the fight, not just taking damage, but, like, genuinely, the dog comes out better than the person, requires a person to basically lay down and refuse to fight. And I think the last thing I'll say about this is they also asked people if they thought they could win a fight against a grizzly bear. And the fact that anybody said yes, not that many people said yes, but the fact that anybody said yes shows that some people are insane. Like, they just don't understand how like physical violence works, what it means to be like unarmed against an animal that has God-given weapons, claws and teeth and jaw power that's dramatically above anything that a human can remotely approach. But I say that to say this. There's a lot of what I guess I would call social desirability bias in all of this, because if you're telling me that the a lot of Americans simply wouldn't be willing to strike President Trump, I can see that. And when I think about like would I win in a fight versus Trump, um, I think I would. Well, I know I would win. The problem is he can't beat me because he is a 78-year-old man, and yeah, he's got me a little bit in height and weight, but he doesn't have any cardiovascular fitness. He has practically no flexibility. I mean, his exercise is basically walking from one room to another. You know, occasionally he has to go up and down some stairs, and he gets it done. I mean, that's the nicest thing I can say about his fitness level, other than the fact that he does play golf pretty well. You know, his swing for a 78-year-old man is pretty good. I mean, he's a very effective golf player, and you know, it's worth you know. That's not nothing. There is a significant amount of balance required, even to generate the relatively small amount of force that he is generating. But like, I would beat him by covering my head and bracing. Like he would do more damage to his fists striking me than I would take from being struck by him. And like this is not I'm not saying I'm like a paragon of fitness. I'm just saying that like the fact that I know how to brace my core and protect my head is enough even if I literally don't throw a strike. Like the only thing he could do to really hurt me more than he hurts himself is maybe if he's wearing shoes kicking me. And the thing is that like in order to kick, you know, above basically the knee requires a degree of balance and flexibility that I seriously doubt he possesses. So if you're asking me these survey questions, the the answer of could I beat Trump in a fight is like is this are you serious? Like I wouldn't have to fight him to win the fight. Um, so then you go to I think the could the average American beat Trump in a fight question is a little tougher to answer, but I'm just gonna answer it as an average man beat versus Trump and then an average woman versus Trump. Average man, pretty straightforward. You have the average American man is about 190 to 200 pounds and roughly 40 years of age, and really about as active as Trump is, more active probably, but similar in that they're living a relatively sedentary lifestyle. Now, if you're asking me if like an average landscaper or an average, you know, any kind of general contractor or anybody who works with their hands could physically defeat Trump in a fight, then yeah, like it's not a hard question. Virtually every man in this country, provided that they do not have some kind of even more severe physical condition restricting their ability to do basic tasks than Trump does, then yeah, there's no question. If you're asking, it's like the guy that, you know, stays at home all day and does basically nothing to upkeep his body, you know, whose level of sedentariness, if that's a word, matches Trump pretty closely. It's a little bit of a harder question, but as long as he's younger than Trump, you have fundamentally a very similar situation to my situation. And you know, I think really when you look at the breakdown by Democrat versus Republican of saying, could I beat Trump? What you're really seeing is like people asking whether they would be able to like mentally beat Trump socially, whether they think the social consequences or like because me like the idea of myself striking somebody who's physically like Trump, it's a little bit appalling in the same way that like I wouldn't strike a woman or child, right? Um, even if a child attacked me, like a child punching me as hard as they could is less of a threat to me than me basically swatting them on the ear. Like it's not even the same category of thing for me to strike them as them to strike me. So like, you know, at some level I get it. Why Republicans I lost the number here, but I think about 39% it was of Americans said that they would not, or excuse me, of Republicans said that they could not defeat Trump in a fight. And I think they interpreted the question very differently. They didn't think, do I have the physical capabilities to do this? They think, would I do this? Could I look myself in the mirror if I attacked my president? And I think the answer that they gave is, you know, honestly a good answer to the wrong to a question they weren't asked. Um, and now going on to the average woman versus Trump, that's a lot harder. I think the average American woman is like 5'5" and about 150, 160 pounds. And really taking seriously the idea that you have two combatants that actually want to do each other harm, um, I think the woman still wins because the woman, all they really have to do is avoid Trump. Trump doesn't really. He has like a big advantage. Like basically, if he body slams them, um, that would hurt the woman potentially more than it would hurt Trump, depending on exactly how insufficient those veins are. But I think that basically, if the woman avoids him for a relatively short period of time, a minute or so, they'll be able to tire him out to either win by TKO or, if he falls over and has some kind of cardiac event, that's a win. Or if he simply can't do it, if they have any sense of how leg kicks work, there's really nothing he can do against them. And the 8-year-old versus Trump, I think this is the one where really how exactly is an 8-year-old going to hurt him? I mean, maybe lots of small punches, and his very thin skin and his venous insufficiency, might give an 8-year-old an advantage. But the problem is 8-year-olds aren't going to have a sense of how to develop a strategy to actually win a fight. It's just such a weird, like an absurd task. And their level of abstraction generally isn't that good. I don't see really how Trump doesn't win against an 8-year-old. But I just think that this question is kind of entertaining in the same way that, like, I watched the Lex Friedman podcast where he asked some guy, I think the guy's name was something Danaher. He's like an MMA fighter trainer, and he was asking this guy, if like the most highly trained MMA fighters could defeat a gorilla in hand-to-hand combat. And the guy was basically trying to, as gently as possible, without calling Lex Friedman an idiot, explain that, like, no. Like, Conor McGregor would get his arms ripped off by a gorilla. Like, there's no chance. A gorilla is just, like, fundamentally a different type of creature than a human. There's just, like, they have higher proportion of fast twitch fibers. Like when I say they'll rip your arm off, like the reason you don't hear about that is because, again, going back to the social reasons. Why would they go out of their way to kill humans? They're not really a physical threat unless they're armed with guns, in which case I don't think you hear all this loud gunfire. I'm not sure how the gorilla's going to react, but the odds are pretty good that they're either going to run or basically, run straight at the person. There's not a lot of in between there, but I don't know. I mean, at the one level, like, why am I even making this video? This is such a stupid question. Like, why? Who cares whether I could beat Trump in a fight? But I would say that when I'm looking at this problem, I do understand to some extent why Republicans answered the way they did, because I wouldn't hit if Trump attacked me. I wouldn't fight back in the sense that I would not strike him. There's no question. For the same reason I wouldn't hit a woman or a child. Ultimately, it's more of a social question, and you have to create a bizarre hypothetical for this question to even remotely begin to make sense.